Hi guys, how are you today? In this video I will show you how to install SQL Server in Windows machine. I do have Windows 10, so can you please subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much. So let's start off. So I'm going now to show you how to download SQL Server. So the first thing you have to do, you have to go to this website. This is the Microsoft website. I will share with you guys the link in the description. You will find it below. So here you have three options: SQL Server on Azure. Azure, this is the cloud. I'm not interested in installing SQL Server on Azure. This is also extend SQL to to LAT device for real-time analysis with Azure. This is the cloud too. I'm not interested in too. So this is SQL Server on premises. So here you can. This is what I'm interested in. On premises, that means that you're gonna install SQL Server in your real machine. I mean in Windows, and on your laptop or on your computer. Free trial. Okay, if we scroll down, here you see you can download a free specialized edition, so developer or express. So I'm gonna go for a developer edition, so it's free. I'm going to click to I'm going to click and download now. As you can see, this is the I mean this is the I already download the software. Now let's go to install it in my machine.
So what I'm going to show you now is how to install SQL Server Developer Edition. This is for if you are going to be a junior DBA, and this is really important information that you need to know when installing SQL Server. So to do this, go to the Microsoft website and download the latest version of SQL Server Developer Edition onto your desktop. And once that has happened, double click on the icon. And it will ask you to run the file if this pop-up comes up, and a splash screen will appear. You have three different ways of installing SQL Server. You've got the basic way, which will just install all the basic configurations that you need. You've got a custom, which you can pick and choose what you want to install, and there is a download media button that you can press, and this is for when you want just to download the media files and install them later on of a machine of your choice. For this version of the lecture, I'm going to pick the custom box, so that's the middle one. So I'll just click on the middle one, and here it says specify a developer edition download location. I'm just going to keep with the default and press install, and this will download all the information, all the software that it needs to install SQL Server Developer Edition. This might take between 0 and 10 minutes. It all depends on your network speed and the type of hardware that you are using. So what I will do, I will pause the lecture and restart it once this section has been completed. Now that the software has been downloaded, the software opened up automatically and it will show you this screen. Here you can plan to actually install the software, and there are other tools that you can use to help you have a successful installation of SQL Server. On this screen, on the left hand side, there are some tabs, and on the first screen is called planning. So if you click on the first one, it will show you what kind of hardware and software requirements you need to install SQL Server. The next tab is some security documentation, if you need to know how to set up SQL in a secure way. And there are other tabs that you can read. There's like a system configuration checker, to help you have successful SQL Server installation. So it's really up to you on how much you want to read on this, and the more you read, the more you understand what SQL Server can and can't do. But the most important ones really is the hardware and software requirements, just to make sure you've got a powerful enough hardware to install SQL Server is very important in the long term, because you don't want the SQL Server to be running on a underperforming server, because it won't function properly to your requirements. So the next screen that you will pick on the left hand side is called installation. So I will click on the installation screen now, and on the installation screen there are many links that you can press to install different parts of SQL Server. SQL Server comes with many different components that people use to input and extract information out of it. There are things called reporting services, where you use that to report on the data within SQL Server, and there is SQL Server integration services, where you use that to extract data from the database in different formats, and there is analysis services, where you use to analyze the data in your database. The parts that we're going to install is called the SQL Server Engine. So the engine is where you will install SQL Server, you put all your tables, all your databases, and store all your queries and prepare your data for extraction for SSRS and SSIS. And so that's what we're going to install. We're going to install the SQL Server Engine's side of the entire package. And to do this, you would click on the first link here, and it's called New SQL Server Standalone Installation, or Add Features to an Existing Installation. So if you just click on the first link, and after a couple of seconds this screen will disappear and will give you more options for what you can do. And because this is a developer edition, it's free for you to play around with and test out what you need to know. This version I'm using is SQL Server 2017. You might be using an earlier version or a later version, but generally this will be the exact same process that you will need to install SQL Server. So on the first screen, I'm selecting developer and I'm clicking next. Then after this screen, you've got your terms and conditions. After you've read all your terms and conditions, just make sure you click the I accept these licensing terms and press next. Then it'll do some checks. Then this screen will just ask you to do you want updates automatically to be downloaded for SQL Server. So you can tick it or not tick it. For this lecture, I'm just going to keep that unticked, but it's really up to you. And it'll do some more tests just to make sure that everything is installed and if there's any errors. So after this has finished, it'll come up with what's passed, what's failed, and what's a warning. So for this hardware that I'm using, it's passed everything that it needs to pass, and it's got a bit of a warning on the firewall. But if you've got all passes and a couple of warnings, and it's like a test environment, you can continue. If it's going to be going into a production environment, just click on one of these statuses just to see why it's failed or why it's got a warning on. But for this purpose on my test platform, I'm going to click next. So on this screen, it's going to ask me what would I like to install. So I'm only going to be installing for this lecture. I'm going to be installing the database engine service, I'll install the SQL Server replication components, and I will install the connectivity tools, and I think that's around about it. I won't install anything else after looking through all these options. At the bottom it will tell you where the files are going to be installed to. If you're happy with where it's going to be installed, just click next. Then on this screen, after it's past this screen, it will give you just some more options. So I'll just wait to see how long it takes. It doesn't take that long. When you install SQL Server on a machine, you can have a named instance or a default instance. The default instance is the name of the machine, and you can only have one default instance per machine. So if your machine was called CloudVR, the default instance name would be called CloudVR. If you wanted to install multiple installations of SQL Server on the same machine, then you can have a named instance. A named instance is the name of the machine plus the name that you give to your named instance. So if the name of the machine was called CloudVR and you wanted to have an extra installation of SQL Server and call that dev1, the named instance would be called CloudVR/dev1. You can also install multiple copies of SQL Server, so you could easily have a dev2 environment, a dev3 environment, and you can go on and install as many different copies of SQL Server on the same machine, as long as your hardware can handle the performance of extra installations. For an assignment, what I'm going to set up is for you to install a named instance of SQL Server, so you can understand a bit better what's the difference between a default instance and a named instance, if this explanation wasn't clear with you. So in one of the assignments, when it comes to installation configuration, it's going to be install a named instance, and it's going to be this section that you're going to change. At the moment I'm going to install the default instance, but in the assignment you're going to click the named instance and just type in dev1 and continue with the exact same steps. So now I'll go back to the default instance and continue and press next. And once this is done, here you've got more options that you can install. So you've got a SQL Server agent, and an agent really looks after jobs. So if you wanted something to be scheduled on a regular basis, say like you wanted some data to move around on a schedule, you can set up a job, and a job would sit in this SQL Server agent, and this agent would control when jobs would start and stop, and if a job fails, who to alert. So that's what the SQL Server agent is for. It's more to run things on a scheduled basis, and that's what most people will use the SQL Server agent for. The database engine is the root where all the database sits. So all your database tables, all your stored procedures, all the data would sit in this database agent. And the SQL Server browser is used for clients to gain information about the SQL Server instance that is running. If there is only one SQL Server instance running on a server, this service should be left as disabled. But if you have a named instance and a default instance on the same server, you should enable this service. So as you can see from the screen, the SQL Server agent is going to be started up manually, so I'd have to start this service manually. The SQL Server engine will automatically start, and the SQL Server browser, because I've already got one instance that will be installed on this server, will be left as disabled. So on the screen, just press next, and here you can set up how people can access SQL Server. Windows Authentication Mode just means if you have a Windows network and you have Active Directory, you can use your Active Directory username to gain access into SQL Server. If you don't have a Windows Active Directory, or you would like to access SQL Server without using Active Directory, you can select this mixed mode option, where you would use a username called SA, which stands for System Administrator, and you would type in a password. So in this example, I will use mixed mode, and I'll type in a secret password for myself. And again. And I'll also add the current user as well. And this should take a couple of seconds to add my user. So this user is how I log into this operating system. So I've logged in as administrator onto this workstation. So when I log in through like a Windows account, I don't have to supply username and password if I've already logged in into the PC. For being like a junior DBA, you don't really need to know what all these other things are. This screen can be configured later, and I'll show you how to do that. And this, I will go into more detail on how TempDB works in a way. And fast streaming is a bit advanced for being a junior DBA, so I'll leave this section out as well. So I'll press next on the screen, and this is just a bit of a summary before I install the software. So I'll press install, and it will go on to the next screen where it will attempt to install all the software. This might take a while, so what I'll do, I'll just pause this lecture and I'll come back once it's finished. Now that it's installed, you can now close this and go back to this window. And so now that it's installed, the next thing you need to do is download and install SQL Server Management Tools, and we'll do that in the next lecture.